I was staring at the same page I'd been staring at for 20 minutes. Module 3 of the revised claims documentation standards. 15 pages of flowcharts and bullet points about how to fill out forms I'd been filling out for 6 years. The coffee next to my elbow had gone cold. My kitchen table was covered in printouts, stuff my supervisor had emailed Thursday with a note that said, "Please review before Monday." That's corporate speak for mandatory. It was Saturday, early, maybe 7:30. I flipped the page. Module 4 was about photographic evidence protocols. I already knew this. I'd taken the last training on this exact topic 8 months ago. They just changed the header format and added a new approval checkbox. My phone sat face down next to the stack. I hadn't checked it in an hour. Didn't need to. I knew if I picked it up, I'd just scroll, and then it'd be 8:30, then 9, then noon, and I'd still be sitting here in my boxers and a t-shirt that said Blackwater Falls State Park, getting nothing done and feeling worse about it. The window over the sink showed gray. Charleston in January. Overcast and cold, but not cold enough to snow. Just cold enough to make you not want to go outside. I could see my neighbor's recycling bin tipped over in the alley. It had been there since Thursday. I looked back at the training packet. Module 5 was titled, Maintaining Appropriate Boundaries in Client Communication. That was it. I stood up, grabbed my phone. I had a text from Terry from last night that I'd forgotten to answer. It just said, "Still good for tomorrow?" with a thumbs up emoji. Terry loved emojis. Used them constantly. I'm pretty sure he thought they made him seem approachable. I typed back, "Yeah, and then what time?" Even though we'd already talked about this earlier in the week. He answered in under a minute. 5M your place? I sent back a thumbs up. Felt weird doing it. Not my style, but it was faster than typing sounds good. Then I went and found my pack. I was up at 4:15, which meant I didn't really sleep. Just dozed in and out with my phone alarm dreading in the back of my head. I'd laid everything out the night before. Habit, base layer, pullover fleece, soft shell jacket, wool socks. My boots were by the door next to my pack. Laces already loosened. I made instant coffee, the bad kind. Drank it while I checked my gear one more time. Map, compass, headlamp with fresh batteries plus a spare set and a Ziploc. First aid kit, water bottles, protein bars that tasted sort of like cardboard and sort of like peanut butter. Fire starter, space blanket, whistle. I had a little flare gun I'd pulled from an old boating kit my uncle gave me years ago. Probably expired. I didn't know if flares expired, but I tossed it in anyway, down at the bottom of the pack with the bolt cutters. The bolt cutters were overkill. Terry'd told me that last time. We were doing navigation drills, not breaching operations. But sometimes the Forest Service locked trail gates and didn't tell anybody, and I didn't want to drive 2 hours just to turn around. They were small ones, 14 inches. Fit diagonal in my pack. I checked my phone. 4:53. I brushed my teeth, put on deodorant, pulled my jacket on and shouldered the pack and went downstairs. Terry pulled up at 4:58 in his truck. I could hear it before I saw it. He drove an old F-250 that burned oil and had a muffler problem he kept saying he'd fix. I locked my door and headed down. The parking lot behind my building was still dark. One streetlight, mostly busted, flickering yellow every few seconds. Terry left the truck running. I could see him in the cab, drinking something from a travel mug. I opened the passenger door. "Hey." "Yo." He was wearing his vest already, the high visibility kind. Bright yellow with reflective stripes. He wore it everywhere during SR stuff. Said it was good practice. I thought it made him look like a crossing guard. I tossed my pack in the back seat next to his and climbed in. The heat was on full blast. Smelled like coffee, something else. Fast food, maybe. There was a wrapper on the floor. "You eat?" he asked. "Not yet. There's a breakfast burrito in the bag. Still warm, probably." I looked. There was a grease-spotted paper bag by my feet. I pulled out the burrito. It was warm. Eggs and sausage and something that might have been peppers. Thanks. No problem. He shifted into reverse and backed out. Figured you wouldn't eat before we left. That's you. He wasn't wrong. We got onto the interstate heading north. Not much traffic. A few semis. Someone in a sedan going way too fast. Terry drove with one hand, mug in the other, talking about the route. So I'm thinking we park at the Gardenier trailhead and do the loop counterclockwise. Keeps the elevation gain gradual. We can practice resection at the knob, then run a few bearings on the way back down. Sounds good. Should be easy. Weather's supposed to hold till afternoon. I glanced at him. I thought snow was coming. Yeah, but not till later. We'll be out by then. He took a sip of coffee. Phyllis said the roads are clear all the way to Elkins. Phyllis was the dispatcher for County Emergency Management. She and Terry talked a lot. I think he had a thing for her. He'd never said it, but he brought her up constantly. She working today? I asked. Yeah, weekend shift. He grinned a little. Why, you gonna call in a fake emergency so I can talk to her? No, didn't think so. He changed lanes to pass a truck hauling logs. Anyway, I told her we'd be out of cell range most of the day, just in case something comes up. You think something will? Nah. January's quiet. Everyone's too cold to get lost. I finished the burrito and stuffed the wrapper back in the bag. Terry merged onto Route 33 East. The sky was starting to lighten, gray turning pale blue at the edges. You check your pack? He asked. Yeah. Flares, cutters? I looked at him. How'd you know? 'Cause you always bring them, every time. He laughed. Dude, we're doing a training hike. You don't need to bring a breaching kit. It's 2 things. It's like 6 pounds. 4. Still. He shook his head, still grinning. I'm just saying, you overpack. And you underpack. I pack smart. You forgot a map last time. I had my phone. Your phone died. Because I forgot my battery brick. That's different. I didn't argue. This was basically our routine. Terry moved fast and forgot stuff. I moved slow and brought everything. It worked out. He turned the radio on. Some local AM station playing old country. Turned it low. So what's the plan after? He asked. After the hike? Yeah, I'm thinking we grab coffee in Elkins. There's that place on Main that does the good breakfast sandwiches. You ever been? Don't think so. They're solid, and they're open till like 2 on Saturdays. He glanced over. Unless you gotta get back. I thought about the training modules on my kitchen table. No, I'm good. Nice. We drove for a while without talking. The road curved through hills, bare trees on both sides, a few farms, a church with a gravel lot, a gas station that wasn't open yet. Terry's phone was in the cup holder between us. It lit up once with a notification, but he didn't check it. The sky kept getting lighter. We passed a sign for the Monongahela National Forest, 17 miles. You bring the topo? Terry asked. Yeah. Good. Mine's in the glove box, but I think it's the old edition. I leaned forward and popped it open. There was a map in there, folded wrong, along with about 15 napkins and a tire pressure gauge. Yeah, I said. 2008. Thought so. I closed the glove box, looked out the window. We were climbing now. The road got narrower. Snow on the shoulders, plowed back into dirty ridges. Terry slowed down a little, not much. He drove the way he hiked. Confident. Maybe too confident. His phone buzzed again. This time he picked it up, glanced at the screen, frowned. Huh. What? Text alert. Emergency management. I sat up straighter. What's it say? He squinted at it. We were going through a valley and the signal bar flickered. It's loading. Hang on. The road curved. His phone buzzed again, longer this time. The screen lit up with a message. Terry read it out loud. SOS activation received. Coordinates north 38.847, west 79.831. Gardenier Knob area. Repeat signal detected. All available SAR units respond. He looked at me. I looked at him. "That's where we're going," I said. "Yeah," Terry said. "It is." Terry's phone lit up again, third time in maybe 40 seconds. He picked it up from the cup holder and swiped. I watched his face while he read, the blue glow washing out his features in the early light. His jaw tightened. "Phyllis," he said. "What did she say?" He turned the screen toward me. I had to squint to read it with the truck bouncing over a rough patch. The text was short, direct, the way Phyllis always wrote. SOS activation received. Coordinates north 38.847, west 79.831. Godnear Knob area. Repeat signal detected. All available SAR units respond. I read it twice. The coordinates sat in my head, and I pulled up the mental map I'd been reviewing all week. North 38.847, west 79.831. That was right on top of where we were headed, maybe half a mile from the trailhead parking. "That's our spot," I said. "Yeah." Terry set the phone back down and both hands went to the wheel. He didn't slow down. If anything, he leaned forward a little, like that would get us there faster. "So, someone hit their emergency beacon," I said, stating the obvious, but I needed to hear it out loud. "And then what? They stopped responding?" That's what repeat signal means. Device keeps pinging, but no one's updating or canceling. He glanced at me. Could be they can't. I felt my gut tighten. That cold, practical weight that drops in when a situation stops being theoretical. "Forest Service will mobilize," I said. "Phyllis sends this to everyone. They've got the ranger station 15 minutes south. Probably. So we let them handle it." Terry didn't answer right away. He took the next curve a little faster than I liked, and the tires made a small noise against the pavement. The road was getting narrower. Trees crowded in on both sides, bare branches crossing overhead. "We're already here," he said. I knew that tone. That was Terry's decision-made voice, the one he used when he'd already committed and was just waiting for me to catch up. "We're not here yet," I said. "We're in a truck on Route 33 doing a training hike." Training hike to the exact coordinates where someone just called for help. He tapped the phone screen even though it had gone dark. "We've got packs, we've got gear, we're 10 minutes out." "Terry." "What?" I didn't know how to say it without sounding like I was bailing, which maybe I was. But this felt different from our usual call-outs. Those came through official channels with Phyllis coordinating and other teams staged and everyone knowing who was where. "This should go through the Forest Service," I said. "They know the area. They've got the resources." "Sure. And while they're mobilizing and driving up from the valley, whoever's out there is sitting in the snow getting hypothermic." He glanced at me again, longer this time. "You know how fast things go bad in January." I did know. We'd done a recovery 2 winters back, a day hiker who'd slipped on ice and broken his ankle. He'd been down for 6 hours before we found him. Survived, but lost 3 toes. "We don't have comms," I said. "We lose signal a mile up." "Phyllis knows we're out here," I told her this morning. "You told her we'd be out of range doing a training loop. And now we're doing a response." Terry's voice stayed calm, but his hands were tight on the wheel. "Look, I'm not saying we go cowboy. We hike to the coordinates, we check it out, we assess. If it's bad, we stabilize and call it in when we get back to signal. If it's nothing, we keep going with our day." The logic was sound. That was the problem. It trapped me in a corner where arguing felt like I was prioritizing procedure over someone who might actually need help. I looked out the window. The sky had gone from pale blue to flat gray in the last 10 minutes. The weather report had said afternoon snow, but that line between morning and afternoon was never as clear as people wanted it to be. "Fine," I said, "but we stick to protocol. Assess and assist, not search and rescue. That's all I'm saying." He was already slowing down, scanning the right side of the road. I saw the turnoff before he did. A narrow forest road, barely 2 lanes. with a wooden Forest Service sign half buried in plowed snow. Gaudenir Scenic Area, 2 miles. Terry took the turn without signaling. Not that there was anyone behind us. We hadn't passed another car in 15 minutes. The road got worse immediately. Packed snow, rutted from old tire tracks. With tree branches hanging low enough I heard them scrape the roof. The truck's shocks complained over every bump, and my coffee from earlier started to feel like a bad decision. I checked my watch. 7:43. The sun should have been higher by now, but the cloud cover made everything dim and flat. Then I felt it on the windshield. Small taps, barely visible. Snow, Terry said. Just a few flakes at first, scattered, lazy, the kind that doesn't stick. But within maybe 30 seconds, it thickened. Not a storm, not yet, but steady enough that Terry turned on the wipers. They dragged across the glass with a squeak that set my teeth on edge. The trees closed in tighter, mostly bare trunks, oak and poplar with dense underbrush buried under snow. Visibility dropped fast. 20 yards, then 15. The world shrank to just the tunnel of road ahead and the white static filling everything else. "This is picking up quick," I said. "We're almost there." I didn't ask how he knew. The road didn't have markers and the snow was erasing any sense of distance. But Terry drove like he was sure, leaning forward now with his face close to the windshield. The crack was so loud I thought something in the engine had blown. A massive snap, sharp and wet, and then a dark shape dropping fast through the white. I had half a second to register branches, bark, the thick trunk of a poplar, and then it hit the hood with a crunch that shoved the whole truck down on its suspension. Terry slammed the brakes. We skidded maybe 2 feet and stopped hard. The windshield didn't break, but a spiderweb of cracks shot across the passenger side, right where the trunk had landed. For a second, neither of us moved. The tree lay across the entire hood, angled from my side down toward Terry's front fender. It wasn't huge, maybe 12 inches across, but it was enough. The hood was buckled inward and I could hear something dripping. Coolant, probably, or oil. "You good?" Terry's voice came out tight. "Yeah, you?" "Yeah." I tried my door. It opened maybe 3 inches and then hit branches. I shoved harder, but the tree had come down with half its limbs still attached, and they'd wedged against the frame. "I'm blocked," I said. Terry tried his. Same problem. The tree had landed at an angle that pinned both doors. "Back seat," he said. We both twisted around. The crew cab had rear doors, but they were small, and the packs were in the way. I grabbed mine and shoved it toward the front, trying to clear space. Terry did the same. His pack caught on the headrest, and I had to pull it free while he squeezed between the seats. There was a gap on his side where the trunk bowed up over the fender, maybe 18 inches of clearance between the tree and the door frame. Terry went first. He got the rear door open and slid out on his stomach, dragging his pack behind him. I heard him grunt, and then he was out, standing in snow up to his shins. "Come on," he said. I pushed my pack through and followed. The gap was tighter than it looked, and the bark scraped my jacket. My shoulders barely fit. For a second, I thought I was stuck, wedged between the tree and the truck. But then Terry grabbed my arm and pulled, and I squeezed through into the snow. I stood up. My boots sank deep, probably 8 inches. The snow was still coming down, thicker now, and the cold hit my face all at once. The truck sat at an angle with the front end caved in and the tree crushing the hood. Steam rose from somewhere under the crumpled metal. The road behind us was already filling in with fresh snow. Ahead, it disappeared into white static and dark trees. No signal out here, no other cars. No one knew exactly where we were, except that we'd said Gaudenir area, which covered a lot of ground. Terry looked at me. His face was pale, and his breath came out in clouds. "Well," he said. "Shit." I pulled my pack on and tightened the straps. My hands were shaking a little. Not from cold yet, just adrenaline working through. The weather had been fine 10 minutes ago, Now we were on foot in a snowstorm with a pinned truck and someone out here who'd already triggered an SOS. This had escalated fast. Terry grabbed the poplar trunk with both hands and tried to roll it toward the passenger side. His boots slid in the snow. The tree didn't move. "Help me shift it," he said. I dropped my pack and stepped around to the other side of the truck. The tree was heavier than it looked, probably still green under the bark. I got my gloves on the trunk and pulled while Terry pushed. The bark was rough and cold even through the gloves. We both leaned into it. Nothing. The tree had landed at an angle and punched the hood inward right where the engine block sat. The metal had buckled around it. I could see the dent wrapping partway around the trunk. "It's wedged in," I said. Terry kept pushing. His face turned red and his breath came out in white clouds. The tree shifted maybe an inch, then settled back into the crumpled hood with a grinding noise that made my teeth hurt. "God damn it!" Terry let go and stepped back. He wiped his gloves on his vest. Steam was still rising from under the hood, but thinner now. The dripping had slowed. I looked at the tree again. It wasn't going anywhere without a winch or a saw and a lot more time than we had. Snow was already collecting on the bark. Terry unclipped something from his belt. A handheld radio. Black, heavy-looking, with a stubby antenna and a county emergency management sticker peeling off the side. I'd forgotten he carried it. He twisted the volume knob and static burst out, loud enough to make me flinch. "Dispatch, this is Mitchell. You copy?" Static. He adjusted the squelch and tried again. "Phyllis, this is Terry Mitchell on SAR Portable 2. Do you copy?" More static. A faint warble that might have been a voice or might have been interference. Then nothing. Terry turned the dial through 3 or 4 channels. Every one of them was the same flat hiss. He held the radio up over his head and keyed the mic again. "Anyone on this frequency, this is SAR Portable 2 requesting relay to Randolph County Dispatch." Nothing. He lowered the radio and clipped it back on his belt. His jaw was tight. That was when it really hit me how far out we were. No cell signal, no radio contact, no one driving past. The truck disabled and the snow coming down harder now, already covering the tire tracks we'd left on the road behind us. Terry had told Phyllis we'd be out of range all day. She wouldn't expect to hear from us. The Forest Service would mobilize eventually for the SOS, but they didn't know we were here or that we'd wrecked. We were just gone. I pulled my jacket tighter. My hands were cold. Terry looked at the truck, then at the road ahead disappearing into the trees and snow. "We should hike toward the SOS point," he said. "Meet whoever's coming from Elkins." I stared at him. "We don't know how far out they are. Closer than if we sit here." He adjusted his pack straps. "Road's blocked behind us anyway. Tree came down right after we passed that last bend. We'd be walking the same direction either way." He wasn't wrong. The road back was already filling in. Even if we hiked out, it'd take hours in this weather. And the SOS coordinates were less than a mile from here if I remembered the map right. But leaving the truck felt wrong. You're supposed to stay with your vehicle. That's what every survival guide says. Stay put, make yourself visible, wait for help. "Snow's just gonna keep piling up," Terry said. "We stay here. We're sitting in it till someone notices we're missing. That's tomorrow at the earliest." I looked at the truck again. Snow was already halfway up the tires. The windshield was covered. In another hour, you wouldn't be able to tell it was here unless you walked right into it. Staying felt like waiting to get buried. "All right," I said. I picked up my pack and shrugged into it. The straps bit into my shoulders. Terry was already moving, stepping around the front of the truck and heading up the road. I followed. The snow was falling thick now. Not heavy flakes. Small, dry ones that stuck to everything. They collected on my shoulders and the top of my pack. I could feel them landing on my face. Cold, little pinpricks. We walked along the shoulder where the snow was a little thinner under the trees. Terry stayed a few feet ahead of me. His yellow vest made him easy to track even through the snow. I kept my eyes on the ground, watching for roots or rocks under the white. That's when I saw the boot prints. They angled off the road about 20 yards ahead, cutting into the woods on the left side. Fresh. The snow inside them was maybe half an inch deep, while the surrounding ground had 2 or 3 inches. Someone had walked through here recently, within the last hour, I figured. "Terry." He stopped and turned. I pointed. "Tracks." He came back and crouched next to the prints. Big treaded soles, hiking boots, probably 10s or 11s. The stride was long and the prints were deep, like someone moving fast or carrying weight. "Hiker," Terry said. He stood and looked into the trees where the tracks led. "Has to be the SOS." The tracks went straight into the woods. No hesitation. Whoever made them knew where they were going. We followed them. The trees closed in fast once we left the road. Mostly bare trunks with underbrush buried under snow. The tracks wove between the trees, skirting a fallen log, ducking under a low branch. I had to push through a tangle of dead vines that caught on my jacket. Then I saw the fence, chain link, 8 feet tall, maybe taller. It ran left and right through the trees as far as I could see in the snow. The top was strung with 3 strands of barbed wire angled outward. The whole thing sagged in places under dead vines and years of weather. Rust bled down the links in long orange streaks. The boot prints stopped right at the fence. Terry walked up to it and grabbed the chain link with both hands. It rattled. "Forest Service site," he said. There was a sign wired to the fence about 10 feet to our right. Faded white with red letters, half covered in dead vines. I pulled the vines aside. Restricted area U.S. Forest Service. No trespassing authorized personnel, only below that in smaller text. Violators subject to prosecution under 36 CFR 261:16. Probably an old research station, Terry said. Weather monitoring or wildlife tracking. They put these up all over in the 70s and 80s. Then half of them got abandoned when funding dried up. That made sense. But the fence bothered me. It didn't just run straight. It curved. I could see it bending away through the trees on both sides, following the slope of the hill. Like it wrapped all the way around the knob. Most Forest Service fences I'd seen were just barriers across a road or trail. Enough to keep vehicles out. This one looked like it was meant to circle the whole area. Keep people out. Or keep something in. I shook that thought off. That was stupid. Terry walked along the fence line, following the boot prints. They paralleled the fence for maybe 30 feet, then stopped at a gate. The gate was the same rusted chain link, 10 feet wide, set between 2 metal posts, sunk in concrete. A heavy chain looped through the latch, and a padlock the size of my fist held it shut. The lock was old, covered in rust and grime. The boot prints stopped right in front of the gate. Then nothing. No prints leading away. Just snow. "They went over," Terry said. He pointed up. The barbed wire at the top of the gate was bent down on one side. A scrap of dark fabric hung from one of the barbs, fluttering in the wind. "Looking for shelter," Terry said. "Makes sense. If there's a building inside, it'd be better than sitting out here." I looked at the fence again. The way it curved away into the trees. The barbed wire angled outward, not inward. Outward meant it was designed to keep people from climbing in, not out. "We going in?" Terry asked. I didn't answer right away. The fence felt wrong. The whole setup felt wrong. But the tracks led here, and whoever made them had gone over. If they were hurt or hypothermic, they might not be able to get back out. I slipped my pack off and unzipped the main compartment. The bolt cutters were at the bottom, right where I'd packed them. 14 inches, red rubber grips, blades designed for chain and light metal. I pulled them out and handed them to Terry. He took them and looked at me. "Told you these were overkill." "Yeah," He positioned the cutters on the chain just above the padlock where the links looked thinnest. The handles were too wide to get full leverage with his gloves on, so he pulled them off with his teeth and dropped them in the snow. He squeezed. His knuckles went white. The cutters bit into the chain with a grinding sound that set my teeth on edge. The chain held. Terry repositioned, got a better angle, and squeezed again. His shoulders tensed. I heard him grunt with the effort. The chain snapped. The sound was sharp and flat in the cold air. The cut ends sprang apart, and the padlock dropped into the snow with a soft thump. The chain slithered through the latch and fell in a loose coil at Terry's feet. He handed the bolt cutters back to me, and I shoved them in my pack. My hands were shaking a little. From the cold, probably. Terry pulled his gloves back on and grabbed the gate with both hands. He pulled. The gate swung inward. Smooth. No resistance. The hinges didn't even creak. It opened like someone had oiled them yesterday, swinging wide on both sides until it stopped against the posts with two soft metallic taps. That was wrong. The fence was decades old, rusted through in places. The lock had been corroded and caked in grime, but the gate moved like it had been used recently, like someone maintained it. Terry didn't seem to notice. He was already stepping through, following the boot prints that reappeared on the other side in the thinner snow under the trees. I stood there for a second, looking at the open gate, at the way it had swung inward so easily, at the fence curving away into the woods on both sides. Then I followed Terry through. I stepped through the gate first. Terry was still coiling the cut chain, so I went ahead. The boot prints continued on the other side, pressed into snow that looked cleaner here. Thicker too. I took 3 steps and my boot slipped sideways. Not much. Just enough that I had to catch myself on the gate post. The ground felt wrong. I looked down. Snow covered most of it. But where my boot had scraped through, I could see moss. A lot of it. Thick, uniform moss that formed a slick mat across the entire clearing. Not patchy the way moss usually grows. This covered everything in one unbroken layer, dark green going almost black in places. It was wet. I could see moisture beading on the surface, even though the temperature was well below freezing. Terry came through behind me. "You good?" "Yeah. Watch your step." He planted his boot and slid the same way I had. He caught the fence. "Hell!" I crouched down and pushed the snow aside with my glove. The moss went on for as far as I could clear. I pulled at the edge and it came up in a sheet, flexible and tough. Underneath, I expected dirt. Instead, I saw vine runners. Dozens of them. They lay in straight lines beneath the moss, crisscrossing at perfect right angles. They were too organized. Vines don't grow that way. They twist and loop and follow the path of least resistance. These looked more like buried cords than plants. Each one was about as thick as my thumb, smooth and dark brown with a faint sheen. I touched one, and it was cold, rigid. Not frozen exactly, but firm in a way that felt wrong for organic material. "What is it?" Terry was standing over me. "Vines, I think." I let the moss fall back into place and stood up. "They're under everything." He looked at the ground, then at the trees around us. Forest Service probably had landscaping projects, erosion control or something. That didn't explain the grid pattern, or the moss. But I didn't have a better answer, so I just nodded. We kept walking. The boot prints led straight ahead, cutting through the clearing toward a line of trees maybe 40 yards out. I kept my eyes on the ground, watching for roots or rocks under the snow, but mostly I was thinking about those vines, the way they'd been laid out. Deliberate. I figured it was some kind of research setup, maybe soil stabilization testing from back when the station was active. That made sense, except the moss didn't fit. You don't get that kind of uniform coverage without serious maintenance, and this place had been abandoned for decades, according to Terry. The trees ahead weren't as dense as the ones outside the fence. They were mostly evergreens, tall and straight, with branches that started high up the trunks. The snow was thinner under them. We passed into the shade and I could see better. The boot prints angled left, following what might have been an old trail. We followed. That was when I saw the tower. It stood about 100 yards ahead, rising above the tree line. A fire tower. I'd seen pictures of Gaudenir Knob's tower before, back when I was reading up on the area for training routes. This was it. Four-legged steel frame, maybe 60 feet tall, with a cab at the top. The metal was dark, either painted or rusted. Hard to tell from this distance. The stairs zigzagged up the side in switchback sections. And at the base, parked on a patch of cleared ground, was a Forest Service ATV. Terry saw it the same time I did. He picked up his pace. I stayed a few steps behind, scanning the area. No one was around. The ATV was green, older model, caked in mud and snow. The engine was off. I could see that from 10 feet away because there was no steam, no exhaust, nothing. Just a cold machine sitting in the snow. Terry reached it first. He walked around the front, checking it over. Keys are in it. I came up beside him. He was right. The key was in the ignition, turned to the off position. The seat had a dusting of snow on it. Maybe an inch. Not much, but enough to tell me it had been sitting here a while. At least since the snow started. Probably longer. "Ranger must be up top," Terry said. He looked at the tower, shading his eyes, even though the light was flat and gray. I looked too. I couldn't see anyone in the cab. The windows were dark. Terry walked toward the stairs. I stayed by the ATV. Something about it bugged me. Not the keys exactly. People leave keys in vehicles out here all the time, especially Forest Service. It's not like anyone's going to steal an ATV in the middle of the woods. But the whole thing felt off. The snow on the seat. The way it was parked, slightly crooked. Like someone had stopped fast and just gotten off without straightening it out. The door on the storage box in back was unlatched, swinging open an inch or two. I opened it the rest of the way. Inside was a coil of rope, a toolbox, a first aid kit, and a plastic water bottle half full. Standard gear. Nothing missing that I could tell, but it felt abandoned. Not like someone had parked and gone up the tower. More like someone had walked away mid-task and never come back. "Roberto." Terry was at the base of the stairs, one hand on the railing. "Let's go." I closed the storage box and followed him. The stairs were steel grating, the kind you can see through. I don't love heights, but I'm fine as long as I don't look down. I kept my eyes on Terry's boots ahead of me and climbed. Each step clanged under our weight, echoing in the stillness. The snow was coming down harder now, catching in my eyelashes and melting on my face. I wiped it away with the back of my glove. Halfway up, I grabbed the rail to steady myself. My glove slid. I tightened my grip and felt the rail shift under my hand. Not the whole structure, just the surface. I stopped and looked at it. The rail was coated in something. A green film, slick and slightly tacky. I'd assumed it was moss or algae, the kind of growth you get on outdoor metal after years of moisture. But when I gripped it, the coating flexed. It moved under my glove, stretching and compressing. It felt organic, like damp skin stretched over wire. I let go. Terry was still climbing. He hadn't noticed. I looked at my glove. The palm was stained dark green. I wiped it on my jacket and kept going, keeping my hands off the rail. The cab was small, maybe 8 by 8, with windows on all 4 sides and a peaked roof. The door faced the top of the stairs. Terry reached it first and tried the handle. It opened about 3 inches, then stuck. He pulled harder. It didn't budge. "Swollen," he said. "Wood does that." The door was metal, but I didn't correct him. He braced his foot against the frame and pulled with both hands. The door scraped open another few inches, enough to get a shoulder through. He turned sideways and pushed. I heard something crack, probably the latch, and the door swung wide. Terry stepped inside. I followed. The cab smelled like mildew and something else. something faintly sweet and rotting, like wet leaves in a bag. There was a cot against the far wall, neatly made with a wool blanket folded at the foot. A small desk sat under the north-facing window with a desktop radio on it, the kind with a handset and a coil cord. A rain jacket hung on a hook by the door. It was bright yellow with reflective stripes and a Forest Service patch on the shoulder. The name tag read Hartley in black letters. No one was here. Terry crossed to the radio and picked up the handset. He pressed the talk button. Nothing. He checked the power cord. It was plugged into a battery pack under the desk, but the indicator light was off. Dead. I looked around. There was a shelf with canned food, a camp stove, a lantern, a pair of binoculars on the windowsill. Everything was organized, intentional. Someone had been living here, or at least staying here regularly, but the dust on the desk was thick. I ran my finger through it and left a clean line. The logbook was on the corner of the desk, under a mug that had dried coffee stains inside. I picked it up. Standard Forest Service issue, spiral-bound with a green cover. I opened it to the last page with writing. The entries were dated. The most recent was from 4 days ago, January 11th. The handwriting was neat, small, all capitals. It was signed at the bottom, M. Vasquez. I read the first entry on the page. Jan 11, 0600, vines climbed overnight. Measured 4 feet of growth on east fence section between yesterday evening and this morning. Growth rate not consistent with seasonal norms or known species in area. I kept reading. Jan 11, 1200. Animal noise cut out at approx 11:45. Total silence for 18 minutes. Resumed at 12:03 with normal birdsong. No visual confirmation of cause. Jan 11, 1530. Satellite SOS. Messenger activated inside desk drawer. Unit was powered off with battery removed as of 0800 this morning. Drawer was closed. No evidence of external interference. Device transmitting standard distress signal on 406 Meteor Z. Manually deactivated and stored in Faraday bag. The last entry was at the bottom of the page, underlined twice. Jan 11, 1820. Fence is failing. Vines have compromised structural integrity at multiple points. Do not attempt entry without full gear and backup. Perimeter no longer secure. That was it. Nothing after that. The next page was blank. I read the warning again. The fence is failing. We just cut through the fence. We were inside. Terry crossed back to the radio on the desk. He picked up the handset again and turned the volume knob all the way up. Static came through the speaker, same flat dead sound as his portable radio on the road. He pressed transmit and said his call sign twice. Nothing came back. He released the button and the static continued. Batteries charged, he said, tapping the pack under the desk with his boot. The indicator light I'd seen earlier wasn't actually off. It was just dim. A faint amber glow I could only see now that my eyes had adjusted to the cab's interior. Signals just not reaching. I figured that made sense. We were inside a national forest during a snowstorm, on top of a knob, surrounded by terrain that ate cell signal on good days. The tower was probably built when radio worked better out here. Or maybe the equipment was too old, or the frequency was wrong. I didn't know enough about radios to say for sure. Terry put the handset down and moved to the window. He leaned forward with both hands on the sill, looking out through the glass. Snow streaked past outside, coming down thicker now. I could barely make out the trees below. "There's a fire," Terry said. I stepped closer. "Where?" He pointed down and to the left toward the tree line past the ATV. "Right there. See it?" I leaned in next to him and followed his finger. At first I didn't see anything except white and gray and the dark verticals of tree trunks. Then I caught it. A small orange glow between the trees, maybe 50 yards out from the tower base. Definitely fire. Coals or embers, something burning. "Someone's down there," Terry said. He turned and headed for the door before I could say anything. His boots hit the metal stairs fast, clanging down 2 at a time. I grabbed my pack straps to keep them from bouncing and followed. The stairs rattled under us. I kept one hand near the rail but didn't touch it, remembering the slick green coating from the climb up. Terry was already at the bottom by the time I made it halfway down. He didn't wait. He headed straight toward the tree line, following the direction he'd pointed from the window. I reached the ground and jogged after him. My pack bounced against my back. The snow was deeper here, almost to mid-shin, and every step required effort. Terry's yellow vest made him easy to track even as the trees closed in. The fire was exactly where he'd said. A ring of stones, maybe 2 feet across, with coals glowing orange and red in the center. Actual heat coming off it, I felt it on my face from 6 feet away. The setup looked clean, professional. The stones were all the same size, arranged in a perfect circle with gaps for airflow. And sitting right on top of the coals, balanced across 2 of the stones, was a satellite messenger. The screen was lit. Bright green LCD display showing a single word in block letters, SOS. My chest did something I wasn't expecting. A quick kick of relief, or maybe hope. Someone had been here. Someone had called for help. We'd found the right spot. Terry stopped at the edge of the fire ring. I came up beside him and looked around. There was a backpack leaning against a tree trunk 3 feet to the left of the fire. Dark blue, modern design. Hip belt unbuckled and hanging loose. The fabric was clean, dry. No snow on it at all, even though snow was collecting on everything else. The stones, the ground, my shoulders. "Hey!" Terry called out. His voice carried, but no one answered. He tried again, louder. "Forest Service? Anybody here?" Nothing. Just wind and the hiss of snow falling through branches. I crouched next to the fire ring and looked at the messenger. It was a Garmin, I thought. Maybe an InReach. The kind that costs $300 and works anywhere because it pings satellites instead of cell towers. The screen was still lit with that SOS message, and a little icon in the corner blinked on and off. Active transmission. But the buttons on the side were wrong. I leaned closer. The plastic casing around the buttons had warped, melted inward so the edges were smooth and rounded instead of crisp, like someone had held a lighter to it. Except the screen was fine. The device was still working. It didn't make sense. I shifted my angle to see the coals better. They glowed steady and even. The kind of heat you get from hardwood burned down over an hour or more. Ash had built up around the edges in soft gray drifts, and in the ash, curled up near the center, was a strip of something that wasn't wood. I stared at it. My brain didn't want to process it at first. It was maybe 3 inches long, dark brown on one side and pale on the other. The pale side had fine hairs, short ones laid flat. The edges were curled from heat. Skin. I stood up fast. My stomach did a roll. I took 2 steps back and looked at Terry. He was already crouching on the other side of the fire, reaching for the messenger. "We need to grab this," he said. "Get it back to signal range and update the coordinates. Let them know we found the site." "Don't touch it," I said. He paused, fingers an inch from the device. "What?" "Just don't." But he'd already made up his mind. He reached out and wrapped his hand around the messenger, lifting it off the stones. The vines came up fast. They snapped out from under the stone ring, whipping up through the gaps where the airflow had been. Thin, dark, maybe the same ones I'd seen under the moss at the gate. They wrapped Terry's wrist in 2 loops before he could pull back, then coiled up his forearm to his elbow in a smooth spiral. Another vine came from the left and wrapped his neck. Terry made a sound, half shout, half choke, and dropped the messenger. It hit the snow and the screen went dark. He grabbed at the vine on his neck with his free hand, trying to pull it off, but it didn't budge. His face was already going red. I yanked my pack off and grabbed the bolt cutters from the side pocket where I'd shoved them after Terry used them on the gate. I didn't think. I just moved. I swung the cutters at the vine around his wrist, aiming for the center of the coil. The vine slid left. It moved before the cutters got there, sliding along his arm like it had seen the blade coming. The cutters closed on empty air with a metallic snap. I tried again, going for his neck this time. Same thing. The vine shifted, flowing up toward his jaw, and the cutters missed. Terry's eyes were wide. He made a gagging sound and clawed at his throat. The vine tightened. I felt something wrap my ankle. It yanked. My legs went out from under me and I hit the snow hard on my back. The cutters flew out of my hand and disappeared into the white. The vine pulled again, dragging me toward the fire ring. I twisted and dug my fingers into the snow, trying to find something to grab, but there was nothing except moss and loose powder. Above me, the branches started moving, not swaying, bending, deliberately. The birch and poplar limbs overhead bent inward from all sides, curling down toward the clearing like fingers closing around a fist. They interlaced as they moved, weaving together, blocking out the sky piece by piece until all I could see was a lattice of dark wood and white snow shifting and tightening above us. I dropped to my knees and yanked the bolt cutters from my pack. My hands were shaking. Terry had both hands on the vine around his neck now, pulling, and his face had gone from red to something darker. I grabbed the vine wrapped around his wrist first, positioned the cutters, and squeezed. The blades bit through. The vine split with a wet snap and something sprayed out. Not sap, too thin. It hit my face and jacket in a fine mist, warm, smelling like turned earth and something chemical I couldn't place. The severed end of the vine didn't fall. It whipped backward fast, curling in on itself, twisting in the air before dropping into the snow. The other end, still attached underground, recoiled the opposite direction and slid back through the gaps in the stone ring. The movement was wrong, not like a cut rope or a snapped branch. It moved the way a snake moves when you step too close. Terry sucked in a breath, loud and ragged. His free hand was still clawing at the vine around his neck. I shifted the cutters, but more vines came up through the snow near his boots, thin, dark tendrils threading toward his ankles. "They're under," Terry said. His voice came out hoarse and strangled. "Underground. Everything." I looked down. The snow around us was shifting. Not from wind. Small depressions appeared and filled, tracing lines outward from the fire ring in every direction. I could see the vines moving beneath the surface, spreading. I dropped the cutters and grabbed for my pack, digging past the first aid kit and the space blanket until my hand closed around the flare gun. It was old, the grip cracked, and I hadn't fired it in probably 10 years. Might not even work. I pulled it out, flipped the barrel open, and checked the chamber. One flare loaded, one spare in the side pocket of my pack. That was it. Terry made a choking sound. The vine around his neck had tightened, and another one had wrapped his other wrist. He was on his knees now, pulled forward toward the fire ring. I stood, aimed the flare gun up and away from Terry, and pulled the trigger. The kick was harder than I remembered. The flare shot up with a hiss and a bright magnesium white that burned my eyes even when I looked away. It arced over the fire ring, trailing red smoke, and landed in the snow 10 feet past Terry. The flare kept burning, spitting and crackling, throwing harsh red and white light across everything. The vines recoiled. Not all the way, but enough. The ones around Terry's wrists loosened, and the one on his neck slid down an inch. He gasped and pulled at it with both hands. It came off slowly, and he threw it into the snow. I lunged forward, grabbed the shoulder straps of his vest with both hands, and pulled. Terry scrambled backward on his knees, and I kept pulling, dragging him away from the fire ring toward the tower. His boots slid through the snow, leaving 2 long tracks. The flare was still burning behind us, but the light was already dimming. The ground resisted. That's the only way I can describe it. My boots sank into the snow and soil beneath deeper than they should have. And when I tried to take a step back, it didn't release right away. I had to pull hard, and my boot came free with a wet, sucking sound. Then it sank again. Every step was like that. Sink, pull, sink. The soil felt soft and loose under the snow, but it grabbed. It pulled backward. Not just resistance, actual pull. Terry got his feet under him and we both moved faster, half running, half stumbling. The flare behind us sputtered and went out. The fire ring was still glowing, but the orange light didn't reach us anymore. The tower was 20 feet ahead, 15, 10. We hit the base and I shoved Terry toward the stairs. He grabbed the rail and started climbing. I was right behind him. My boot hit the first metal step and I heard something scrape. I looked down. Vines were threading up through the grated steps, thin ones, coming from below and weaving between the gaps. One hooked Terry's boot at the ankle. He jerked his leg and it held. Another one wrapped the toe. He pulled harder and his boot stayed pinned. "Roberto!" I grabbed his belt and hauled him up and backward. His boot slipped free and we both stumbled off the stairs onto the ATV pad. The pad was concrete, cracked and stained, but solid. No moss, no vines coming through. I looked at the ATV sitting there with snow on the seat and keys in the ignition. I let go of Terry and ran to the ATV. Climbed on, turned the key to on, checked the kill switch, thumbed the starter. Click. One click, then nothing. I hit the starter again. Same thing. The battery was dead. Or the starter was shot. Or something else. I didn't know. The engine was cold, no smell of gas, no sign it had been running recently. The whole thing felt wrong. The same way the Ranger's cab had felt wrong, like someone had just walked away and left everything exactly where it was. Terry was still on the concrete pad on his hands and knees, breathing hard. I looked past him and saw the vines coming, not threading up slow anymore, surging. They poured over the edge of the pad in a wave, dark and twisting. Some as thin as string and some as thick as my thumb, all of them moving fast and smooth. They reached Terry's boots and wrapped them both in seconds, coiling up his calves. He tried to kick free, but they pulled him forward, dragging him off the pad back toward the snow. I jumped off the ATV, grabbed the bolt cutters from where I'd dropped them, and started cutting. I got 2 vines off his left boot and 3 off his right. More kept coming. I cut through one wrapping his knee and another going for his thigh. The severed ends sprayed that same warm mist and recoiled, but it didn't matter. For every one I cut, 2 more took its place. A thick one came up under his chest and lifted. Terry made a sound, half grunt and half shout, and his whole body tilted backward at an angle that wasn't right. His shoulders were still on the ground, but his chest and stomach were rising, pulled up by the vine wrapped around his ribs. I could see the pressure through his jacket, the way the fabric bunched and stretched. I shoved the cutters onto the vine and squeezed as hard as I could. The blades bit halfway through and stopped. I squeezed harder. The cutters jammed. I pulled them back and saw a black thorn buried in the vine, thick and sharp, wedged between the blades. It didn't look like wood, it looked like metal. I tried to pry the cutters free, but they wouldn't budge. Terry was staring at me. His eyes were wide and his mouth was open, and his expression was desperate in a way I'd never seen from him. Not panic. Worse, urgent. He was trying to tell me something, but he couldn't get the words out. I dropped the cutters, grabbed the flare gun, dug the spare flare from my pack, and loaded it. My hands were shaking so bad it took 3 tries to get it into the chamber. I snapped the barrel shut, aimed at the knot of vines around Terry's chest, and fired. The flare hit direct. It punched into the tangle and kept burning, white and red and throwing sparks. The vines recoiled fast, unraveling, and Terry dropped. He hit the concrete on his side and rolled, coughing. I reached for him, but the ground moved. Not shifted, opened. The snow and soil beneath Terry split in a neat line and pulled apart. He slid toward the gap, scrabbling at the concrete, and I grabbed for his vest, but my fingers only caught fabric. The ground pulled him down. Not fast. Steady. He went under up to his waist, then his chest, then his shoulders. His hand came up and I lunged forward and grabbed it. His fingers closed around mine and I pulled, planting my boots and leaning back with everything I had. The ground pulled harder. Terry's hand slipped. His fingers slid through mine, and then he was gone. The gap closed. The snow settled back into place, smooth and even, like nothing had happened. His jacket was still there, torn at the shoulder, lying on top of the snow. Next to it was his handheld radio, the black one with the county emergency management sticker, half buried. I stood there, I don't know for how long. My chest was heaving and my legs were shaking, and I couldn't process what I'd just seen. The snow kept falling. The fire ring was still glowing behind me. The forest was silent. I bent down and picked up the radio. It was cold and heavy in my hand. I clipped it to my belt, grabbed my pack, and ran. I didn't go back through the clearing. I went around the fence line, following it downhill through the trees until I found a spot where the chain link had rusted through at the bottom. I forced the gap wider with both hands, the metal cutting into my gloves, and squeezed through on my stomach. My pack caught, and I had to shove it ahead of me. I got through, stood, and kept moving. The woods felt wrong. I was heading downhill, following the slope, but twice I looked up and realized I'd curved back toward the tower. The trees were too uniform, the gaps between them too even. I forced myself to pick a line and stay on it, checking my compass every 30 seconds. The needle spun. It wouldn't settle. I put the compass away and just moved, pushing through underbrush and ducking under branches, going down. I reached the road maybe 20 minutes later. WV Route 250, two-lane blacktop, snow-covered but passable. I stood on the shoulder and looked both ways. Nothing. I started walking east, toward Elkins, because that was the only direction I knew. A snowplow came around the curve maybe 10 minutes later. Big orange truck, blade down, pushing snow to the side in a high ridge. I stepped into the road and waved both arms over my head. The plow kept coming. I waved harder, shouting, but my voice didn't carry over the engine noise. The plow passed me doing maybe 20 miles an hour, the driver looking straight ahead through the windshield, and kept going. I watched it disappear around the next curve. I kept walking. My legs felt like they were going to give out, but I didn't let myself stop. I pulled out my phone every few minutes and checked for signal. Nothing. Then one bar. Then two. I tried calling 911, but the call dropped. I tried again, and it connected. A dispatcher answered, and I told her I needed the sheriff's office in Elkins. There'd been an accident. Someone was missing. She transferred me, and I gave the address and said I'd meet them there. Then the call dropped again, and I kept walking. I made it into Elkins just after noon. The sheriff's office was on Court Street, a low brick building with county vehicles parked out front. I walked in through the front door, snow still on my jacket and pack, and a deputy at the desk looked up. His name tag said, Barker. He was maybe my age, clean-shaven, calm expression. I put Terry's radio on the desk between us. My partner's gone, I said. There's a fence and a tower up on Gaudineer Knob, Forest Service site. He went under. The vines took him. Barker looked at me, then at the radio. He picked it up, turned it over in his hand, and pressed the talk button. Static came out of the speaker, flat and dead. He tried a different channel. Same thing. He put it back on the desk. You said vines, he said. Yeah. Took him where? Into the ground. Barker nodded slowly. He didn't look like he believed me. He looked like he was deciding how to handle this. He asked for my name, and I told him. He asked where exactly this happened, and I described the fire tower, the ATV, the boot prints, the fence with the chain we cut. He wrote it all down. He asked if I had coordinates, and I gave him the SOS location from the alert. He asked if anyone else saw this, and I said no. He asked if I had proof, and I pointed at the radio. He picked it up again, pressed transmit again, static again. This just sounds like a dead channel, he said. I didn't have an answer for that. Barker kept asking questions. I kept answering. I told him about the ranger's cab, the name Hartley on the jacket, the logbook, the satellite messenger, and the fire. I told him about the moss and the vines under it and the way the ground moved. I told him about the flare and the bolt cutters and Terry's hand slipping through mine. Barker wrote it all down. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he put his pen down and looked at me for a long time. "We'll send someone up to check the site," he said. "Might take a while with the snow." I nodded. There wasn't anything else to say. I walked out with my pack and my gear, and Terry's radio still sitting on Barker's desk, producing nothing but static. I had a name from a logbook, a jacket with a patch, and a story about a disappearance I couldn't make sound believable even to myself.